Hello, everybody, and welcome to this MIAA high school basketball hockey state championship preview extravaganza, whatever you want to call it. My name is Gage Nutter, and I'm a high school sports reporter with MassLive, and we have a great show here for you today. I'm going to have what's probably double-digit reporters from across the state on to preview all of these championships that we're going to have starting on Friday at the Tsongas Center with boys and girls basketball state championships. And we're going to dip into some hockey previews as well for those games at TD Garden on Sunday. We're going to have 16 champions crowned by the end of this week. And it's going to be a lot of fun. Will dynasties be cemented? Is Malden Catholic going to win their fourth straight boys basketball state championship? Will schools like Hopedale, Norwell, Milton, and more win their first ever titles in their respective sports? We will soon find out. It's all going to be very exciting. And if you're watching this on YouTube at a later date and not live, if you want to check the description, I'm going to put timestamps for when we get to certain conversations, whether it be boys basketball, girls basketball, boys hockey, and girls hockey, because I will try and be efficient, but we're going to be here for a little while because it's not every day you get to have the chance to be named a state champion. So we're going to really break these games down. So get comfortable, get your water, put the popcorn in the microwave, open up the junk drawer. You deserve it. It's a special occasion. Get comfortable because we're going to really get into it. And to really get into this thing, we really got to bring the heavy hitters first. And by that, I mean my coworker, Meadow Barrow, at MassLive. We're going to pull her in to talk about this D5 championship, but it really wouldn't be a party if we didn't bring in Kyle Grabowski as well, my former coworker from the Metro West Daily News. So we have quite a three-headed monster here. And you guys, I want to get going here. So Division 5, let's take a look at it. It's number 1 Pioneer Valley against number 2 Hopedale. It's the top 2 seeds. It's the 2 teams that a lot of people anticipated would be in this game. Pioneer going for their first state title since 1997 when they went back-to-back in 96, 97. A little Drake reference for you. Hopedale going for their first title ever. It's going to be interesting. Both these teams have had quite a strong performances throughout the postseason. But Meadow, I know when it comes to Pioneer, they're a team that you've seen a few times now. You got the likes of Braden Thayer, Kurt Redeker, all those guys that have been getting the job done for the Panthers for a few years now. But now they're seniors. They're here. They're undefeated. They're in the state championship. What has impressed you the most about Pioneer, and why do you feel like they've been able to get to this game this year?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so just like everything you said, the Panthers kind of, came into this year as a number 1 seed. Really a well-deserved team that just really deserves everything that's coming their way. They really feel like just a really complete team this year. And, they've really kind of just steamrolled all of their opponents leading up into this weekend's game. They got past Prospect Hill, Old Colony Regional, and Ware. And in all of those games, they scored 75 or more points in each of those games, and winning by double digits. But it wasn't until, the game that I went to earlier this week against Drury in the semifinals when they still beat them 49-23, but it was their lowest scoring game of the season. So that's definitely something to keep note of. But obviously, keeping Drury to just 23 points was crazy to see. I think at one point, Drury only scored 3 points combined in the second and third quarter. So, their defense was just on fire that night. But I feel like that, they definitely deserve everything that's coming their way. And it should be a really good matchup this weekend.
Yeah, Meadow, you mentioned just that offense. That's the first thing that jumped out to me in the 70s for all those tournament games. And so you might think, oh, is this a team that can score, but can they do the job on defense? And yeah, you mentioned 23 points, holding Drury to 23. That kind of answers that question a little bit. But Kyle, I want to throw it to you. Hopedale, they're a team that's going to try and unlock that defense and see if they can slow down Braden Thayer. Everybody has really tried to slow down Braden Thayer for the last 3 years, and he said, no, thank you. I'm just going to kind of do as I please offensively, and no one's really had the opportunity to slow him down. But is Hopedale going to have the opportunity to do that? If Hopedale is going to win, what do they have to do to be successful, and what is it that they do so well, do you think, Kyle?
I think with them, the conversation really starts with Patrick Madden, who's really like your very prototypical small school basketball player, guard, a lot of handles. He had his 1,000-point this year, can shoot really well. And it's just a team that is the kind of team that is near and dear, I think, to my heart, which is just your small school team where it's like these kids are also the soccer team and the baseball team, and just that sort of shared language and continuity. I think the thing that Hopedale has going for them is they have not been afraid to play anybody. Like, they had Wellesley on the schedule at one point. They've played, the likes of just a lot of teams that where they're punching up, and that has worked out really well for them. I think the player for them, or the players outside of Madden, who, like, if he has a good game, they're in a good spot, but he's going to be number one on all of your scouting reports. The guys that I think for them are going to make or break it is a guy, Braden Lewis, who is more of a baseball player, but he is like your power forward that is also like a linebacker. Like, he is diving all over the floor. He is getting loose balls. He's going to be the guy that is like getting in people's faces if the game gets physical. Just the kind of guy you need in a game that is for everything. And I really think their X factor is this kid, Nate Rukowski, who is very long, very bouncy, very athletic, like on the thin side because he's, I think, pretty young, but just the kind of kid who, if you're not ready for him, can just be an absolute game wrecker just with keeping offensive rebounds alive and blocking shots and running the floor that you don't see a ton of in Division 5. Just that kind of athlete who's going to impact things with his length.
Interesting. I mean, it's going to be a lot of fun when it comes to the D5 game, not just because of all this talent, not just because Pioneer is undefeated or Hopedale is going for their first state title, but because it's two programs where, of course, it's fun seeing teams that have been there before, and maybe it's their third trip in 4 years or their fifth in 7 years or something like that when you get to these divisions. But these are two programs where it's been a little while since they've had some hardware to hoist up. And for Hopedale, they're hoping for it to be their first time. So D5, that's going to be a fun one. Kyle, we're going to say goodbye to you for now, but if you need more Kyle Grabowski content, don't worry. He's going to be coming back to talk some Division 1 hoops as well once we get to that conversation for the boys for the Franklin Newton North game. But Kyle, thank you so much for now, and I guess the little hasta luego. We'll see you in a little bit.
See you soon.
So, but Meadow, I'm going to keep you around, of course, because it wouldn't be a talk of championship basketball if we weren't going to talk D4 now. And to get his hat in the ring, I want to bring in Rich Garvin from the Worcester Telegram and Gazette. So, guys, if we're going to look at D4 now, if we're going to keep this ball rolling metaphorically, let's take a look. It's number 6 Georgetown against number 5 Monument Mountain. Georgetown, just like a lot of teams this year, seemingly between hockey and basketball, going for their first state championship. They held on against Bourne in the state semifinals. Bourne, obviously, historically strong, especially these last few years, program. They were able to take them down, took down Clinton in the quarters. And then you look at Monument Mountain, the team way out there in the Berkshires. Some people might forget about, but Manny Brown and Griffin McElroy doing their best to ensure that nobody forgets about them. This year, they've had themselves quite a year. And Meadow, I guess I want to start there with you when it comes to Monument Mountain. I mentioned Manny Brown. I mentioned Griffin McElroy. But when it comes to what you've seen with Monument Mountain, I know you were just there at their semifinal game. You were there when Manny Brown scored his 1,000th career point earlier this season. What are you seeing from Monument Mountain? What makes them particularly strong? Why do you feel like they're in this game this year?
Yeah, so I was like you said, I was at their game last night. It was a really good game. It actually came down really to the final seconds, really. It was pretty much tight all throughout the entire matchup. But Holland, I keep wanting to say Burke, but they changed their name.
They just changed. Yes, Holland, previously known as Burke. People might know as Burke, but
Yeah.
now the Holland School of Tech, yes.
Yeah, so they had a chance to score a 3-pointer like with 2 seconds left, but the player missed it, and that was really it. But yeah, they ended up advancing with a 3-point win to this weekend's championship game. But like you mentioned, Manny, he's definitely like obviously their star on the team. I think a lot of people forget like him opening up the season with 50 points against Belchertown, which is, obviously a career high for him. But I really feel like ever since that game to start the season, he really just hasn't slowed down at all. I was there for his 1,000 point milestone game, and it was really cool to see him in person for the first time, actually. But there's lots of other key contributors as well, other than Manny. There's Griffin McElroy, like you mentioned, and then I think a lot of people kind of forget to mention the junior, Dom Coletti. I don't really know how to say his last name, but he's definitely like the Spartans' biggest player. He's really tall, and he's definitely been crucial for their inside game, getting a lot of rebounds and stuff last night. So this team is definitely, I really feel like they're prepared for this weekend.
Got you. Yeah, I mean, good mention when it comes to Dom, because a lot of people might think with Monument, you got a kid like Manny and McElroy, they're shooting the threes and doing all those things, which they do well. And Brown is a really good finisher at the rim as well. But that interior game, always important. You have to be solid at every level, and that's what Monument is this year. And Rich, when it comes to Georgetown, you saw them against Clinton in that quarterfinal game, and I had my eye on Clinton all throughout the year. I mean, as a Central Mass guy, you like to see Central Mass programs doing well, and I thought, oh, the Gales, they're having themselves quite a year. Can anybody stop them in this division? And Georgetown says, well, we can, and they did. And you were able to see that game. So when it comes to Georgetown, the Royals this year in 2025, at least in the game that you saw, what stuck out to you about those guys?
So I'll go back to their last game there. They had, interestingly enough, against Clinton, came down to a last-second three-pointer. Clinton missed it. They hung on. Bourne came down to a last-second three-pointer. They missed it. They hung on. So they've scored, the resilient team, I would say, they've scored 3 field goals combined in the last fourth quarter of the last 2 games. But they're 9 for 9 from the free throw line. So they get in close games. People follow them to make their free throws. I would say one thing that stood out to me in particular was that they're very well prepared. Coach Josh Kilty, you could tell right from the get-go that they knew Davis Lunn is Clinton has a very balanced offense, but Davis Lunn is a leading scorer, about 20 points per game, great range on a three-pointer, quick release, and doesn't need a lot of room to get a shot off. And they were just determined to not let him get any shots off. And the guy who primarily guarded him is the only senior in the starting lineup for Georgetown, and that's Marcos Yones. Terrific on-the-ball defender, great length, can score, but a defensive-first guy. And he did an excellent job of forcing them Clinton to go to their other options. So I would say very well-prepared team from the initial reaction.
Gotcha. And that's going to be just another exciting one. You got number 6, Georgetown, number 5, Monument Mountain. It's not number 1 versus number 2. It's not number 2 versus number 3. Obviously, 2 programs that had really great regular seasons, but also 2 teams that had to beat higher seeds to get here. So they've been through that adversity and they've powered through, and now they're playing for a state championship at the Tsongas Center. So thank you so much to you, Meadow, for always hopping in and talking some Western Mass hoops. And just as I said with Kyle, if you need more Rich Garvin content, do not worry, do not fret. He will be here to chat later on about some Division I girls basketball as well. So I say thank you very much, Meadow, and Rich, we'll see you in a little bit.
All right, thanks, Gage.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. So that was some Division IV boys basketball talk. As I said, number 6, Georgetown, number 5, Monument Mountain. That's going to be a really fun one at the Tsongas Center. And I just mentioned them being 2 programs that had to beat higher seeds to get here. I look at this Division III game, number 2, Norwell against number 20, Old Rochester, in the state championship game in Division III. And to talk about this game, I want to bring in Chris McDaniel, the sports editor of the Patriot Ledger, to have this conversation. Chris, so thanks so much for jumping in. I know that this game a little bit in your wheelhouse here at the Patriot Ledger. So I just want to kind of open the floor to you when it comes to this game. As I mentioned, a number 2 seed in Norwell, a number 20 seed in Old Rochester. Norwell going for their first ever title. This was a program coming into the season that looked like it was ready to go to win a state championship with the guys they had coming back. Old Rochester last season coming off a state title loss with a veteran team. Who would have thought, they'd maybe lose some guys, can they bounce back? And they do it again. And they said, yeah, we'll do it again. And they have. So I want to open it to you. When it comes to these teams, when it comes to this game, what interests you the most in the Division III state championship this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think you touched on it a little bit there. Norwell was kind of a team coming into the season that a lot of people probably expected them to be here. And, I don't know if people would have, had expected them to have the season they had, 24-0. All but 3 of their wins have come by double digits. They have matched and exceeded all expectations that they had. And Old Rochester Regional, obviously, coming off the state's final loss last year, dealt with a lot of injuries early on. They're the team that I don't think anybody really expected to be here. So it's kind of, I think when you were probably filling out your brackets a couple of weeks ago, a lot of people probably had Norwell here and Old Rochester. That's a team that people might not even had coming out of the first round. But I think when you kind of take a deeper look at these programs, you see a lot of similarities where, every year you expect these teams to win a game or two or three, or really make a run in the tournament. You've got two incredible coaches in John Willis on the Norwell sideline and Steve Carvalho on the Old Rochester sideline. So these are two teams that are going to be incredibly well coached, and you definitely do have the favorite versus the underdog, but tons of big game experience on both sides. Even if maybe some of the names on the ORR side aren't the ones that were making a lot of the big plays last year, but it's still a program that I think every year has that pride where they expect to be playing deep into the tournament.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned it, Norwell, the number of guys they have coming into this year. I think, you mentioned, 5 guys, South Shore League All-Stars this year. So that's pretty good starting 5, if you ask me. And then, as you mentioned, looking at Old Rochester, a program, as we said, state final trip last year, Final Four the year before, Elite 8 the year before that. They've found a way to sort of keep that bar of consistency at a high level and continuing to match it. And when it comes to Old Rochester, because like I mentioned with Norwell, all those all-stars, a team like Old Rochester who's got that seed at number 20, you might imagine, okay, it might not be a star player. Maybe it's just 5 guys that slap the floor and they get the job done. But is there one player, if people are going to keep their eyes open on Old Rochester coming into the state championship, is there anybody that kind of turns the gear for them a little bit that sticks out on that side?
Yeah, and it's Gavin Martin who's the point guard of the team, and he was the quarterback of the football team, and they went on a nice run in the fall too. So just one of those kids who's a multi-sport athlete who just knows how to win. He's coming into this one averaging about 15 points and 5 assists per game, and I think that's going to be probably the marquee matchup is Gavin Martin on the ORR side running the point, and Ronan Coffey, the South Shore League MVP, running the point for Norwell. Ronan Coffey's I think he's coming in averaging around 17 points and 10 assists a game. So he's just one of those old school point guards who really controls the game and kind of sets the table for everybody else and settles them into the game. So that's going to be one of those matchups that I think is going to be one of the more marquee matchups of the weekend.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. The more you talk about it, just again, it is one of those sort of typical stories. You got the great team, in Norwell, and of course, as well as they've played all year with all those all-stars, they've earned their right to be in this game, more than enough so. And then you got the Old Rochester. It's like, yeah, we're the number 20 seed, but it doesn't matter. So, and once you get into this game, it doesn't matter. It's the Tsongas Center in neutral zone, neutral arena. I don't know whose fans will travel better. I'm sure they're going to be packing the minivans. They're going to be getting buses. They're going to be doing everything they need to do to support their guys. So I'm going to keep my eye open when I'm on the sideline at the Tsongas Center for that game. And thank you so much, Chris, for coming on to talk about that one. And again, if you need more Chris McDaniel content, he will also be coming back later on to talk about the Norwell versus St. Mary's girls basketball game. That's the D3 girls basketball state championship. So Chris, thank you so much for chatting about this one, and I guess we'll see you later. All right. So that was Chris McDaniel, the sports editor of the Patriot Ledger, and I'm getting really fired up just hearing everybody talk about these games. I mean, obviously I've had my finger on the pulse during this state tournament and keep my eye on all these teams, trying to learn their stories, seeing who's winning by 20, who's winning all those close games, because that's what really matters at this point, or something that really excites me at this point in the postseason, is you see those teams that win by 30 and they find their way to the state championship game. And some teams, they're able to do it in the state championship game too. Not every state championship game is close, although maybe us as reporters, we can kind of write the game at halftime. That's for us. But the fans, you want a close game, and so do we. We want something exciting as well. But it's always interesting to see the close games and who wins the close games late in the state tournament, and how that affects things the rest of the way. But I want to take a look going forward as we continue with boys basketball with Division II. Malden Catholic in the Division II state championship, going for their 4th championship in a row. They're going to be playing number 6, Somerset Berkeley. Somerset Berkeley going for their first title since 1954, since the Eisenhower administration. But to take a look at Malden Catholic, if we're going to talk about Malden Catholic, you have to talk about Matt Gaffney. He's the guy. He's been the guy. the last few years, best player in the Catholic Conference, although Nick Barnes at St. John Shrewsbury might have something to say about that as well. But Gaffney this year, definitely up there as one of the better players in the conference. He's attending the Naval Academy next year, where he'll also play basketball. Had himself, again, a great year for the Lancers. So did Jaleel Lawson. Ben Howard has been hurt for most of this season. He was a big contributor last year. He sustained an injury during Malden Catholic's football season at the end of the fall. So for me personally, I'm thinking, okay, so how's that going to affect things for Malden Catholic here on the basketball court? And seems to be all not that much. Of course, Ben Howard is a huge impact player, and of course they'll have to have him more consistently. But with the type of program that John Walsh put together up there in Malden, they're able to sort of bounce back and just sort of continue to find their way and continue to find ways to pick up wins. Only one regular season loss to Catholic Memorial. And you got to look at that Catholic conference schedule as well. If you're Malden Catholic, having that conference schedule obviously helps, being the only Division II team in that conference. Everybody else Division I. You got the likes of CM, BC High, St. John's, Xaverian. So that schedule, they're obviously better for it, having that schedule. They had no issues the first few rounds against Worcester South, Milford, and Doherty. They did have their close game against Oliver Ames, but the late free throws from Abubakar Namaka got them over the top. So Malden Catholic, got my eyes on that. Are they going to four-peat? Are they going to make a program history for themselves in that way? But if they're going to do that, they have to go up against a pretty gritty Somerset Berkeley program. Like I mentioned, they're going for their first title since 1954. And Somerset Berkeley, a program trailed by 16 at halftime against Masconomet. I would say Masconomet. I still don't know. I'm from the state. I have no idea how to say it. I'm trying my best. They're down 14 or 16 at the state semifinals, came back, and now they've won 20 in a row. And they have the history with Malden Catholic. They played Malden Catholic in the state semifinals last year. Malden Catholic won by a bucket, 1-2. So I imagine the players coming back for Somerset Berkeley this year, they maybe been rewatching that whole tape. They're probably still fired up. Although a lot of those guys from last year for Malden Catholic, a lot of those guys are gone. I think the only really consistent player that Malden Catholic returned this year was Gaffney, and then Howard as well, although Howard has been off and on as it relates to his status. But Gaffney is the consistent force there for Malden Catholic. But two programs that have history, one program trying to make history, win 4 in a row, another one trying to win their first in over half a century. So either way, D2 is going to be really fun. But what's going to be really, really fun is Division I with number 1 Franklin and number 3 Newton North. And to do that, I'm going to pull Kyle Grabowski back out of the bullpen. We put him on ice, and now we're taking him out of the freezer, pulling him back in. Kyle, this is a game that I'm sure you're very interested in seeing how it plays out. I know you saw, along with me, Newton North in the state semifinals the other day. We saw the Franklin Panthers looming above at Worcester State. They were there sort of watching some of the game, trying to figure out, okay, who are we playing in the state championship game? And Newton North did what they needed to do late against Springfield Central in the semis. Got a little hairy with that Springfield Central defense, but the Tigers held on. But when it comes to Franklin, it's a program I haven't seen. I mean, I've seen Newton North almost half a dozen times to this point, but Franklin, a program you're familiar with. If Franklin is going to win this state championship, if they're going to beat Newton North and become the first in-state team to beat Newton North this season, what is Franklin going to have to do? What do they do well?
Their coach CJ Neely told me at one point, like, this is a bunch of like basketball junkies. Like, they like annoy him to like watch more film and to think about sets. So they just play the game in the way that like I think old heads appreciate, is a lot of passing and movement and ball fakes and pump fakes and shooting and screening and re-screening and defense and communicating. Like there are very few like jump out of the gym and put the ball down with a dunk athletes. Like, they have a couple guys that can do it, don't get me wrong, and the ones that can, they will surprise you. But it is just like a team that knows how to play basketball, has played together forever, and just has done it before. They've gotten here before, And it's amazing that I've gotten this far without saying the words Caden Sullivan, because he is just a guy that was like their second or third best player last year, just a guy who like could really slash and do a lot of good things. But it was like, oh, cool, we got, 10, 15 from Caden. But then this year he just became their number one scorer. He set their single season scoring record to get his 1,000 points, because at the beginning of the year, I was like, you know what? He's probably not going to be able to do it. And then he just goes on a tear. He's had 20 in 18 of their 25 games, and he's hit double digits every game. Just like not a super imposing athlete, but like a sneaky athlete, in the sense that like he's very fast. He gets to his spots. He's strong, and he knows how to shoot and finish. And also, somebody told, like, his AAU coach told me this about him. He's just somebody that, like, if something goes wrong or poorly, like, he's not pouting, he's not yelling at the refs, he's not yelling at his teammates. The thing his coach said to me is like he just pulls deeper within himself. And I just think that is a trait that, like, once you get to this point where it's like your career could end, if you have your best player is the guy doing that, then you're in great shape. But I think for Franklin, like, he's going to do what he's going to do. It's going to be who's their second guy, who's their third guy. Somebody who I am really interested to see how they respond is Jake Olmstead. He did not have his greatest performance against Central Catholic in the semifinals. He fouled out, and he was not thrilled about that. So he is somebody who I imagine is going into this game like, I am gonna put a stamp on this and like really want to make an impact. And a guy that I love to watch is Justice Samuels. He's their like most bouncy athlete, and I imagine, to sort of bleed into the Newton North a little bit, he might be their Tegan Swint guy. Like, he's long and he is athletic enough to just sort of keep up with him. And it's just somebody who is a threat to block shots, and just the guy you want at the back end of your defense, and the guy you can't lose on offense, because he will just slash to the rim and dunk.
Right. And you mentioned having a Tegan Swint guy. I mean, it might need some Tegan Swint guys from what we saw against Springfield Central. I mean, what in that semifinal game that you and I were at, especially in that fourth quarter, they were throwing all they could at him. But he's just that type of guy. And as it relates to Newton North now, talking about Tegan Swint, he runs around without the ball. He can come off a screen, turn, shoot, make a quick three-pointer. I mean, you even asked him after the game, you're like, is there a three-point shot that you don't like? And he was basically like, no. Like,
he said no. Like, he was like, I will take any open shot, and even some that aren't open. But I think an underrated part of his game, and his AAU coach also told me, because I'm working on something that's coming out tomorrow. If
stay tuned.
Metro West Daily News was like and a really underrated part of Tegan's game is like his second jump ability on offensive rebounds. Like, he can he can shoot, he can handle and get to the rim, but if he misses, he's going to go down and back up and get an offensive rebound and either put it right back in, or just in general keep your possession alive. And I just feel like that is incredibly valuable in a game where you're in a big college arena, the sight lines are weird, you're nervous, nobody's going to shoot probably as well as they do in a high school gym. To be able to get second shots and get more possessions, like, that is something that can tip the balance if you're doing that consistently.
Yeah, exactly. It's just one of those things that, as you mentioned, especially early in a game when it comes to this type of environment, like a state championship environment, in a environment like UMass Lowell, where, yeah, maybe in the beginning of games, teams might be sort of trying to figure it out, trying to sort of feel their shots out, and there are going to be some misses, especially late in games when teams are tired. There's a guy like Swint or some of their other big guys who can not get just one, but two offensive rebounds and leave defenses like, oh my God, can we get to the other side of the court? Like, how long is this possession going to be extended? And he's definitely a possession extender. But the thing I was really interested in about Newton North this year, because I saw them once, I think it was their second game of the season, very early on. Saw them at the Hoop Hall Classic, where they had their only loss of the season, which was against a team from California, Albany High School, up from the Bay Area. And that was a pretty close game. Was coming into this year, Tegan Swint, one of the, of course, seniors, as we mentioned, and then Nick Spinelli, who was a Bay State Conference honorable mention this year. They're the two seniors in the typical starting five, and then they got three sophomores in that starting five. So I was really interested in the dynamic of, okay, how does Swinton Spinelli bring these two guys along as underclassmen? Because it's one thing to be an underclassman contributing at the varsity level, but it's another thing to do that at the Division I level and for a program like Newton North. And from everything Coach Paul Connolly has said, the two of them have been really good leaders where they sort of have different type of leadership roles, where Spinelli is always talking. He's always got his jaw flapping. He's always got his something to say, his tongue going. And Tegan is more, he's just like, this is how you do the job. And he gets the job done at a very high level. So it's been interesting to see that those three sophomores, Jake Lyons being one of them, one of those sophomores that's really stuck out to me. Julian Zakak is another one, but Lyons, really good ball handler. He's like the primary ball handler if the ball isn't in Swint's hands. So having those three guys come along, a lot of those younger guys, there's Matthias Stam as well, who's a junior, who will be back next year. Seeing all of those younger guys find their way and getting integrated into exactly what they do has been interesting. But I guess I'll close on this, Kyle. So if Franklin is going to, and you saw it against Newton North, so you have the experience of seeing both teams, Newton North and Franklin. Of course, Franklin more than a handful of times. See, I don't like putting predictions on the spot. I'm going to do it to you, though, just because I know you well enough and I know you'll forgive me. So if you had to, what do you think really happens here?
I think it is a game that is going to be determined by those second and third guys, or whoever does the best with the number one guy. Because the way I see this is like Caden Sullivan and Tegan Swint. That's a push. Like they're in 9 games out of 10. That's a push. Like they're both going to get theirs. And it's a matter of, okay, can you do something to stop them? And I just don't feel like either of those guys can really be stopped. So it's just a matter of like, how do you game plan? Like, do you want to just say like, okay, we're going to just give Swint shots, but they're going to be contested, or are we going to try and take the ball out of his hands? And with Sullivan, is it okay, he just moves the ball so well and it is just running around enough where they're just both guys that do so many different things while their games are so diverse that you almost just have to just make sure that they don't murder you. Make sure they don't murder you, but just like understand that they're going to get theirs. Just make their lives as difficult as possible. And then like who has that second guy, that third guy step up. And I think that's really where the game is won. I do wonder if it's also both of these coaches have been doing it for a long time. Who has that weird schematic quirk or thing that causes somebody to adjust? Like with the Springfield Central game, their longtime scorebook operator was next to me, and he said like if we started pressuring them earlier, we would have won this game. Granted, nobody can press quite in the same way that Central can, but I do wonder if you have all these Franklin guys sitting there like, hey, they didn't love this heavy pressure. Maybe we throw that wrinkle, or do you just say, you know what, we're going to do us. This is how we got here. We're going to try and do us. And I just think it's a game that, like, if you love basketball and if you're a junkie about this stuff, like, this is the purest snow. Like, this is the game that you want to see and just take in and appreciate it. Because I don't think we get these kind of games often where you have two of the best players in the state on two of the best teams playing in the final basketball game of the season in an arena that I feel like is going to be packed and loud. It is like, this is it. This is why we do this.
Yeah. I mean, that just really made me think. I mean, the Newton North fan section has really been coming out this postseason. And then when you think of Franklin, I mean, that's Rattle City right there. So
yeah, I was going to say, we got to say Rattle City, got to give them
Exactly. So, I mean, I know my freshman college roommate who is a Franklin High School graduate will enjoy that. So you're welcome, Jake. Kyle, thank you so much for jumping on, and read Kyle's story in the Metro West Daily News tomorrow morning. Check out Metro West Daily News sports section online, in the paper, physical, wherever you can read it, you should read. Thank you so much, Kyle. And I'm assuming I'll be seeing you this weekend at the Tsongas Center.
Thanks, man. Oh yeah. Catch you in Lowell for sure.
Catch you in Lowell, Kyle. Thank you so much to Kyle. And that was boys basketball, everybody. cinema, Martin Scorsese meme for you all. So, but now we're going to shift gears again, as we tend to do. We're now going to talk a little girls basketball. And if we're going to talk girls basketball, we need to get the experts in. And by expert, I mean Kenny Minogue. So I'm going to bring Kenny in, my coworker at MassLive. Kenny, so you said it before the postseason started, in D5 for the girls, we could have an all Western Mass state championship. And I thought, like, oh, well, that'd be cool. That'd be fun. And then Kenny, like Nostradamus over here, he was just correct. Number 2, Hoosick Valley, coming out of the Berkshires. They've done it again. They've made the state championship, going up against number 5, Renaissance, a program, if I don't want to guess on a live stream, I don't think has made a state championship before. They were in the semis last year, of course, but now in the state championship game. Kenny, I know this game right here is like a Thanksgiving feast for you, so I'm just going to put the plate in front of you. Here's a knife, here's a fork. I guess we can start with Hoosick. It's a program that's been here before. Let's start. And then you have Ashton Leisure, or Leisure, a name I always say incorrectly. Sorry to her mom and dad. Leading the way for the Hurricanes. When it comes to Hoosick, what interests you the most about this year's Hoosick Valley Hurricanes?
Well, I think for me, the key starts with Ashlyn LaShore, because she has really taken over for the team in a way that she started to in a lot of ways last year, taking over more of the offense, especially in the scoring load. But then this year has really continued that, over 350 points on the season already, heading into the state final. Really been fantastic this season, but really I think it's going to be as well. The key is going to be the way that the other players can pick up and have continued to do so from the beginning of the season, specifically from the players they lost from last year. One of the key players I think that has been this year has been Genevieve Laguesse, a freshman who is a tall center in the middle, has scored over 200 points this season for them and provided them a lot more stability and a lot more defense, especially on the defensive end. And that's really came through in their whole run through the tournament. Double-digit wins throughout the whole way, with the closest being their quarterfinal win over Douglas being a 12-point win. And they also do have Emma Messazar still, another score with over 250 points this season. Reagan Shea has made a major step up from her last season, coming in as a sophomore this year, scoring over 200 points this year so far. So they've had a really good balance of scores this year, but I think the performance of Genevieve is going to be really key for them against Renaissance, just because of the matchup that she has against Zion Wallace, because Wallace has, last year, as a seventh grader, Wallace was dominant, and this year she has only gotten better, increasing her scoring. Her scoring last year itself was already pretty massive. That was 455 points on the season. This year, coming into the state final, 482 as about statistics. And it has just been a dominant season for her, and dominant for both teams. But Renaissance in general, 25-0 on the season. I know they don't play oftentimes some of the best competition, but this year, I think, compared to last year when they did not have a resume heading into the postseason of competitive state tournament level competition they're going to be seeing, they did not have that last season, and they were still able to run that all the way to the semifinal and take it up against the Hoosick Valley team, and they were able to go toe-to-toe with them up until the very end of the game. This season, this team that is just as young as nearly just as young as it was last year, practically bringing back everyone that it has, including as well Sinai Baker. Both these two players have continued to grow and continue to grow as leaders in terms of helping the other team and other players get more involved in the offense. I think that was one thing that Renaissance really struggled with last time in their game against Hoosick Valley. Was getting other players involved. They have other young players as well, including Keisha Rodriguez, player who's sort of become a veteran on the team, and Kaylee Buzzle as well. They can really help the team and help Renaissance chances if they can get themselves, if Sana Baker can really help get this team going, if she can help those other players get into the offense more and help them take advantage of their matchups when they have those opportunities, because um, Wallace is going to have some. It may have some challenges facing up against a player like Leguess, who has that size, but she's a young player. She's only a freshman. And Wallace herself, even though she has that experience from last year, she herself is only an eighth grader. So you still have two very young two very young bigs in the middle that are going to have to face this challenge of coming through in this state final.
Yeah, that's the thing when it comes to Renaissance this year, especially last year. The thing that always comes to mind is just the youth, and that's just what it's been. I mean, you mentioned a player who was just putting up a crazy amount of points as a seventh grader, and now she's an eighth grader, and you have a freshman as well. Probably one of the youngest teams throughout all the divisions, whether it be girls basketball, boys basketball, that have gotten to this place. So just a really interesting mix of, as it compares to matching up against Hoosick Valley, maybe a team with maybe a little bit more experience has been obviously at this level before, but a team like Renaissance with so much young talent that is excited to not wait to make their mark. They're going to do it right now. But I want to pose this to you before we move on to Division 4. So it always happens where we can talk about these games and we dissect them, as I know you do, as I know I do, and you get to the game and something happens and it's like, I didn't think that was going to happen. Or like, wow, what didn't see this coming, or I didn't anticipate that. So I want to pose this to you before we talk about some Division 4 as well with South Hadley and Cathedral. If Hoosick, or I guess I'll say, if Renaissance wins, why will they win? If they win, what is going to happen? What's going to be the thing that you think if they win, you go, well, this is why. Well, what's the thing for Renaissance, do you think, if they win? Why?
Well, the two ways that I would see this happening is if Zion Wallace completely dominates Leguess and Genevieve Leguess and outruns her, because that's one of the key things that she has improved upon from last year, is that she has increased and really improved upon her fitness in getting up and down the court, which has allowed the whole team, I think the whole team has as well increased their fitness and getting up and down the court. But with the way that Zion is able to just move the ball herself, as being the big and being the dominant force up and down the court, the fact that she can move the ball as well up the court and start the transition and start the fast break changes the whole dynamic of how dangerous this team is compared to what they were last year, in a way that I don't think that I think that's really actually came through in their in the games that they had to play against that were against better competition this year. They played in the Hoop Hall Invitational and played against Taunton, and they played against New London from Connecticut, winning both those games, and they really showed their ability to get running in on offense. The other way that I could see it happening, personally don't predict this, just because I'm banking on Ashland LaSure to produce. But that would be the other side of it. I do believe that Sanaa Baker does have a slight size advantage on Ashland LaSure that can help her. That does not mean that LaSure hasn't worked against size advantages, because that has been something that she has consistently done throughout her career at Hoosick Valley, constantly, and she has made that work to her advantage. She's one of the top players in Western Mass for that reason, and across the state. But theoretically, that would be the second opportunity. The other avenue is if Sanaa Baker can outwork that matchup, because that's really where it's going to come down to, is those two positions. I do think that Hoosick Valley is more balanced and is more likely to get more points from those other positions, from those other players further down the roster. So as much as I do want to give credit to Zion Wallace Zion Wallace's older sister, and as well to Kaylee Buzzle and to Keisha Rodriguez, players that are talented on Renaissance, I'm going to put more faith at this moment in Hoosick Valley having a more balanced score sheet, but possibly still losing just because of the prowess that the Renaissance's top two players have, and the way that they can also change the defense. I am not quite as sure about whether or not Hoosick Valley's two individual players will change that defense. Will have effect on Renaissance's defense, in that, or Renaissance's offense in that way.
Sure. Sure. I mean, it's going to be interesting. I mean, as I just look at both teams, how they did or have done so far in the tournament. Hoosick Valley's closest game in the tournament was a 12-point win against Douglas. And then Renaissance's closest game, if I remember correctly, was just the other day, 13-point win against Lee's. So these are teams that have been winning by double digits in the tournament. Something's got to give. That's going to be a really fun one. But Kenny, it's just been so good hearing you chat about these Western Mass teams. We just need to keep you to talk about D4 and South Hadley finding their way back into the state championship against number one Cathedral. And if we want to talk about teams that are dynastic and know how to win year after year, that's Cathedral. They're the number one seed. It's a rematch of last year's title games. So these are two programs that are very familiar with one another. A lot of these girls on the South Hadley team are very familiar with Cathedral because last year they only lost one player, who was Drew Alley. And I say only one, but Drew Alley, obviously a very important player to last year's team. But with the way Coach Dubuque does things over there in South Hadley, they've found a way to not rebuild, but reload. So just to give the quick glance here at Cathedral, they've won 6 titles in the last 10 years. Not too bad. They were co-champions in 2020 with Maynard during that the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. And their closest game in the tournament so far was a 24-point win against Uxbridge. So Cathedral is just having their cake and eating it too so far here in this tournament. Hija Allen Paisley has been leading the way for Cathedral, and Graham Dietz, who has been a frequent guest for us here on the B Lives. He wrote a story about her in the Boston Globe a few days ago. So I recommend you go check that out for Graham, everybody that's watching. So I guess I'll just pose this one question for you before we move on to Division 2. South Hadley, as I mentioned, you'd think last year that was the team to get here and to do it. And now the girls just sort of said, well, we just had so much fun last year. Let's just go to the state championship again. How did they find their way back here this year?
Well, I think the key thing that has been in their push is the fact that what you said before, the word you use, reload, because that is exactly what they've done. And in terms of adding talent from the junior varsity team last year, bringing in freshman Olivia Athis, who's been a fire starter off the bench for the team, scoring 200 points over 200 points this season off the bench for the team as a freshman. Leading the way for the team, though, has a sophomore Kate Phillips, who has really taken over in the offense over the last few weeks. Second on the season overall with 265 points, right behind Cara Dean, fellow sophomore for the team. But last few games, Kate Phillips has been absolutely dominant on the boards and really attacking the inside paint, scored 18 points in their win over Millis, was a key figure, especially from the free throw line, got there multiple times, hits, knocked 2 free throws down the stretch, and of the 7 that she made overall, to finish with this game high 18 points for the Tigers. And previously against Carver in the quarterfinals, she scored 21 points, 8 field goals, 5 free throws as well. Cara Dean had 14 points for the Tigers in support. This has been a team that has had balanced offense throughout the year. That was the case for them last year as well. Primarily because, as you mentioned before, Drew Alley, that was sort of the offense, the way that she played. She was a creator for the team from the center position in many ways. Even though Sienna Gurk is still there, she is still the point guard of this team. Also known as CC Gurk, she is a talented player and one of the more so the primary play creator for them. But the way that they're going to have to challenge this Cathedral team is just remember that last year against Cathedral, they were in this game in the first quarter. This was a close game in the first quarter, and Cathedral, and if I do recall correctly, South Hadley was in the lead, 20-15 in that first quarter. Now, it completely flipped in the second quarter. That cannot be denied, and that is something that I do think that South Hadley is still going to have to focus on in terms of whether or not they can maintain that intensity, because that is always the challenge that a team has to face up when they're playing against a team that they have not faced that competition level of. Because in South Hadley, they play against good competition throughout the year. They have played against teams that are above their division. But this is Cathedral. This is another level of talent. This is another level of skill that I do think that on their day, South Hadley can play up to. And on that day, and last year at Lowell, at Tsongas Center, they were on their A game. They had that level for 8 minutes. They had that level for 8 minutes, and then they lost in the second quarter. They tried to climb back, but so often, as we see in basketball, when you're facing against that pressure and you're already facing against a competition deficit, because I'm not even going to put up to the fact whether or not I'm going to, beside talent, because Cathedral plays against the Division I teams consistently. It's not like they only have just have one or two teams. They consistently are playing against top end championship level contender talent. So while South Hadley is facing high level competition, it's not facing the competition that Cathedral is. And I do think that most likely going to come into play some point in the game. And it's about whether or not South Hadley can bounce back and withstand that run.
Right. And South Hadley's hoping it doesn't get a case of deja vu this year when it comes to this game. And Cathedral, they're hoping that they do get a case of deja vu. The thing I'm most looking forward to in this game is, I know last year the fans for South Hadley showed up with beards to mimic the beard of Coach Paul Dubuque. And so I am hoping Coach Dubuque still has his Santa Claus looking beard, and that the fans also show up with the white beards as well. And I'm hoping for a good basketball game, of course. So Kenny, I look forward to seeing you at the Tsongas Center, which I know I will. And thank you so much for jumping on the chat.
Take care, Gage. See you in Lowell.
All right. Thank you so much again to Kenny. That was some Division IV talk as it relates to the girls basketball state championship. Number 1, Cathedral, the powerhouse, against number 3, South Hadley, a rematch of last year's game. That'll be a fun one. But for the people that stuck around, they said, "Where's Chris McDaniel? We came here for Chris McDaniel. We want him back." Okay, we'll bring Chris McDaniel back. We'll bring him back to chat about the Norwell girls, number 3, playing number 1, St. Mary's. So, Chris, thanks so much for sticking around. But when it comes to this game, Division III, St. Mary's, number 1 against number 3, Norwell. Obviously, St. Mary's is a program that is they are a program that is very familiar with getting this far in the state tournaments. So far in this tournament, they've beaten up on Belchertown, they beat up on Newburyport, East Bridgewater, and then Pittsfield, who is a really good team in Western Mass this year. They beat them in the semis. They went back-to-back in 2022, 2023. They were co-champs in 21. They've been here before. A lot of these girls have, this program has. And then, of course, as it relates to Norwell, returned a lot of last year's finalist teams. But so when it comes to this game, for you, Chris, and with what you know about these teams, what interests you the most about this year's Division III matchup?
Yeah, I think there's a marquee matchup, and I know you guys are talking a lot about the Division I boys matchup, but I think when I look at kind of an individual player versus player matchup, the matchup between Norwell's Maddie Oliver and St. Mary's Bella Wumi, that's the one that I'm really excited to see how that one plays out. I think, you got two players who are incredibly versatile. They can score from anywhere on the court. They can defend any position. They've got size. They've got athleticism. That's the matchup that I look at, and I'm like, that's what makes you really excited about covering a state championship game when you have two players going head to head like that.
Yeah, and I guess when it comes to Norwell, just looking at them these last few years, I always love seeing this trajectory with programs that make it far in the state tournament. 2022, lost in the quarters. Year after that, lost in the semis. 2024, lost in the finals. If you're putting the line graph up, things are going like this. So, I mean, I don't know what the saying goes, where if there's things happening a couple times, it becomes a pattern. If we're going to look at it, you would seem to think that Norwell is going to win the state championship this year. But if Norwell is going to win the state championship this year, if they do find a way to beat number 1 St. Mary's, what do you think that reason is going to be once that fourth quarter buzzer sounds? If Norwell wins, why do you think that they could win?
Yeah, during one of their playoff games, Coach Matt Ronnie, he said, at some point in the game, we reached the point where we say, Maddie Oliver, just take this game over and get us to the finish line. And, more oftentimes than not, she's able to do that. So I think it starts with Maddie having a big game, but obviously you're not going to beat a team like St. Mary's with just one spectacular performance. You're going to need a well-rounded effort. And, Norwell kind of has a Batman and Robin thing with Maddie as Batman and Reagan Dowd, who they actually shared MVP honors in the South Shore League. She's kind of the Robin. She's the point guard who kind of runs the show, brings the ball up the court, and gets everybody kind of settled into the offense. But they've got a couple other league all-stars that have to really step up. And Paige McGuire, Alex Cassidy, and Holly Pantia, they're all kids that have kind of really accepted their role and are excellent defenders, but also can step outside and hit a couple shots for Norwell. So I think it's going to take that monster game from Oliver, and then some of the role players really stepping up and going head to head with obviously St. Mary's is a team that talent wise you're not going to find many teams in Massachusetts, especially over the last 10, 15, 20 years, however many years you want to go back, that can match them talent wise. And I think Norwell is a rare team this year that can kind of match up with them. And I think Maddie Oliver is kind of on a mission here. Her older sister Grace Oliver was a really solid player who ended up going to prep school for a couple of years after starting a career at Norwell, and is now at the University of Colorado and having a strong freshman season. So I think there's some unfinished business, not just for this group of Norwell team, but for that family to try and get this program to where they've never been and win their first state title.
All right. Well, it's going to be a tall task, like you mentioned, against St. Mary's. But from what you've said, with the girls that are coming back this year, with the progress the program has made these last few years, climbing that hill from the quarters, the semis, getting to the title game. It's a group of girls that have been there before now. And of course, St. Mary's has too. But two programs that know what it's like to play on this stage. And they're going to go for it this weekend. Chris, I take it, are you going to be at the Tsongas Center for that game? Will the Patriot Ledger have a reporter on site for this one?
Yeah, me and Jason Snow will be there for the Norwell double dipper, going for the Clipper double dip, which they've kind of had a couple chances at this with soccer and lacrosse over the last couple of years. So it's kind of familiar territory for Norwell to have a couple teams at the state finals.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully you guys can fill that sports section with photos. You can get that double dip, and hopefully it's 2 thumbs up just for your guys' sake at the end of it all. But Chris, thanks so much for sticking around. And yeah, read the Patriot Ledger. Everybody, win, lose, whatever it might be, whether Norwell wins or loses on the double dip. Check it out. Thank you so much, Chris, for jumping in.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
All right. What a show it has been so far, ladies and gentlemen. Just really great insight from everybody coming on. Thank you so much so far to everyone that's been on: Chris, Kenny, Rich, Meadow, Kyle, and we have even more coming on to join us as we continue the chat here in girls basketball. If we're going to talk about Division II girls basketball, that's number 1 Medfield against number 6 Worcester South. We're going to bring on a new face that you're all going to be happy to see. It's Trevor Haas from the Boston Globe and basically the Duxbury Clipper. Anywhere else that produces bylines or allows people to write for different outlets, Trevor probably has a byline for them. Thank you so much, Trevor, for being now a repeat guest on the Be Live. I'm really interested in this D1 matchup when it comes to girls basketball, because like I mentioned, number 1 Medfield, number 6 Worcester South. It's a rematch of last year. So another rematch as it relates to the state championship. Medfield, as I said, the number 1 seed. Worcester South, I think they're going for their first ever state championship, if I'm correct. Gianna Estevez led the way for Worcester South in that semifinal game the other day. Medfield, as I mentioned, number 1 seed. They're the reigning champs. When you look at this one, Trevor, here in Division II, what interests you, whether it be just about Medfield individually, Worcester South individually? What is it about this matchup that has your eyebrow raised, if at all?
Yeah, thanks. First off, thanks for having me. Happy to hop on. It was a pleasure. I would say the thing that you touched on, I think the rematch aspect is really intriguing. You see it in D1, D2, and D4, which is rare to have 3 out of the 5 divisions be decided by, it's a rematch, and teams they know each other really well. They had it last year, and now when a player they think about it every night when they're lying in bed. They're like, I want another crack at Medfield, I want another crack at Cathedral, etc. Now they get it. So I think that's pretty cool for especially those seniors who stumbled as juniors, had an awesome year, and then fell just short, and now they get another chance to beat them. I do think that every team that won last year is favored to win again in my eyes. I think I would pick Fian, Medfield, and Cathedral if I had to put money on it, but I do think the other 3 teams have a decent chance to win, so I don't think any game will be lopsided. So I just think that's really fun, the rematch aspect of it. That's something I'm looking forward to seeing.
Yeah, when it comes to this game, just to get a little more insight, if I can here in a moment, I want to pull in Rich Garvin to get some Worcester Telegram and Gazette, Worcester South insight here, because you can imagine it's right in Rich's wheelhouse. So, Rich, when it comes to Worcester South, I know I just mentioned the job they did in that semifinal game. Gianna Estevez did a pretty good job for Worcester South in that game. It seems like she's done a pretty good job for the program during this winter, but they're going for their first ever state championship. If Worcester South is going to get the job done in the state championship and end up beating the reigning champs Medfield, why do you think that might be? What are the things you feel like that they do well?
It all starts with defense for Diego McLean's team. They're allowing 35.2 points on the season in the tournament here, 43, 28, 35, and 39 in 4 games. So that's where it starts. They're deep. They defend 94 feet, and it really that's what the team is built around. Offensively, they've had different people step up. Bescones, this is the senior on the team, and she's averaging about 15, 16 points a game. And they're going to need, conversely, offensively, they're going to need her to get at least her points, 16 to 20. I know the other day, Estevez got the 21, but that's almost triple her season average. So Bescones is the most consistent player for them. But again, it goes back to defense. They play excellent on the ball. Again, defend 94 feet, and that's where it's going to start for them.
Got you. Well, it's another one of those games, and that just really has me interested, just because, as we mentioned, it's the rematch of last year. So it's going to be interesting to see what's going to be the same, what's going to be different this year.
So if I can hop in, I'll just say, so South has won 10 in a row. The last loss they had was to Bishop Fian by 3 points. They held Fian to 47 points. Fian won on a 3-pointer with 1.5 seconds left. So they held Fian. If you take that they scored the 3-pointer. They scored 47 points. Fian, Division I team in the D1 state final, defending champ. So we're talking elite defense on this team.
Well, I'm interested to see it. And Rich, thank you so much for cooking up that transition. I was thinking, how are we going to get to this D1 game? Rich said, let me get in the kitchen and cook something up for you. Speaking of Fian, as you say, Rich, talking about Division I now, and I want to keep you both here because no one better to talk about this game than you two. Number 1, Wachusett, playing that number 2 Bishop Fian team. Wachusett going for their first title ever, if I'm correct. And then, of course, Fian, the reigning champions. Trevor, I know you said that for you, we don't play favorites, but you'd have to assume the teams that won last year and are coming back or in the title games, you maybe give them the edge. So I guess when it comes to Fian, for you, Trevor, what is it about this year's team? Is there anything, I guess, different in comparison to the group last year? They bring a lot of those girls back. Is it new blood picking up the torch? What's jumped out to you about them this year?
I think the thing about Fian is that they just play such a good brand of basketball. It's very fundamentally sound basketball. They play well with one another. They pass the ball. They cut. They rebound. They defend. They do the fundamentals at an extremely high level. So that's something I'm always impressed with. Maddie Steele is their sharpshooter. She can get hot from 3 very easily. Hit 4 or 5 threes in a game like it's nothing. Charlotte Adams Lopez is a great passer. Takes a lot of charges. Scrappy. Good floor general. Lily Singer has really stepped up this year. When they lost Julie Webster last year, I wasn't sure how they would transition, big-wise, but she's really stepped in and been great. Sam Carlson is scrappy. Molly Mullen can score. Shannon Lamorticelli has had really come on strong this year. So they're just a really fundamentally sound team that plays a good brand of basketball, and I think they never beat themselves. So if Wachusett comes out and Jalen Scott catches fire, Tegan Lanford hits some threes, Sophie Gibbons plays well, they have a chance. I don't think it's not a lopsided matchup, but they're certainly going to have to earn it because Fian just plays good basketball. So that's kind of my 2 cents.
Gotcha. So yeah, Rich, although the Mountaineers are the number 1 seed, they have quite a mountain to climb here if they're going to want to be state champions against Bishop Fian. I know you saw Wachusett recently, so probably fresh in the mind. What jumped out to you about the Mountaineers and the way they're doing things this year?
Yeah, so Jalen Scott, I'm not saying she's the best player in the state, but she's in the conversation. There's no doubt about it. She's a 6-foot forward. She's got length. She's super athletic. She's bouncy, great intuition, double machine. She hasn't, the last couple of games, she's struggled a little bit, I would say. She's kind of, let's say this. I think the officials, because she's so athletically superior, sometimes the officials are hesitant to actually call a foul against her or send the other team in the line. And Coach Jim Oxford, after the game, I asked that they kept talking about Jay, trying to calm her down. I asked what was going on, and he was very upfront, saying that, hey, like, it's about time she gets some calls. So I think he was trying to send a message out there ahead of time. I don't necessarily know that she needs the calls, but I guarantee you she's Fian's number one defensive priority to stop. This is something of a legacy program. Wachusett, Scott's sister is playing at Providence College. Sophia Gibbons' sister, Mary, is playing at Navy. Tegan Lanfer has 5 sisters. Multiple ones are playing either Division I basketball or softball. So these are kids that have grown up in a winning culture, watched their older sisters play, played with their older sisters. And I think that's helped them, because this wasn't a team. This is crazy to say, but Wachusett right now is 91-6 over the last 4 years. And this wasn't a team that was expected to go 23-1 this year. It was expected to make the playoffs. But I would say they've gone achieved above expectations. And that goes back to Jim Oxford. I guess much like Fian, I would say they don't beat themselves. The Mountaineers don't turn over the ball a lot. Don't make mental mistakes. Well coached and respond to coaching. So I think it's going to be an interesting game this year. And last year, if memory serves me right, Fian kind of got ahead in the game, and that worked to their benefit with Wachusett having to play from behind. So I think if Wachusett could keep it close in the first half, it's certainly going to boost their confidence.
All right. Well, it's going to be interesting. I mean, you mentioned a program like Wachusett that has had so much success. I mean, you mentioned that win-loss, just like that record in the last decade, that is sustained success. But there are a couple programs that are playing for state championships this year that have gotten close. They've been building these last 2 years. We were just talking about Norwell girls in the other division with Chris McDaniel, a program that's been building and just trying to get over that final hump. It'll be interesting. Can the Mountaineers get over the final hump this year against a great Fian team? Is Fian going to do it again? We're all going to find out here in the next few days. And so thank you so much, Rich. Thank you so much, Trevor, for your insight. Maybe I'll catch you on the sideline here in the next few days.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, guys. Well, that was basketball. That was boys and girls basketball. But if you're here for hockey, let's put our basketballs away. Let's lace up the skates. Let's take the sticks out. Let's tape them up. I don't know what I've been seeing a lot of TikToks, like NHL players. They like have their little routines with the tape and stuff. I don't know. Never played hockey. Don't know what I'm talking about. So let's get somebody in here that knows what they're talking about. And that person is going to be Tom O'Haron from the Boston Herald to talk about boys hockey. Tom, how are we doing tonight? Can't hear you, Tom. Is he on mute? Was he muted?
That's because I was muted. I was just typing away. Awesome.
That's all right. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here. I'm excited for Sunday. I mean, it's been so long since we've seen some hockey, so I'm kind of chomping at the bit here, ready for the action to come around.
Yeah, ready to rock and roll. And I want to kick it off with you to talk about this D4 game. Number 5 Winthrop, number 6 Dedham. If you're a fan of these teams, set your alarms 9 a.m. on Sunday. Get your coffee, get timed up so it's brewing when you wake up. You don't have to put the cream and sugar in. It's just ready to go. And get in your car and get to TD Garden. That's going to be the 9 a.m. game. Dedham, if I'm correct, trying to go for their first state championship.
Correct.
Winthrop going for their first since 1976. So 2 programs that might not be used to winning the state championship, but I mean, they're both in the same boat. So when it comes to this game for you, Tom, just looking at Dedham and Winthrop, Winthrop number 5, Dedham number 6, what interests you the most about this matchup in particular?
Well, first thing I got to say is, there's a lot of strong teams. You always, just root for a good story. And this is just about as good of a story as you can get in D4. I mean, a team that hasn't been in the final since 1976. It's a long time for a program to be around and not get to the state final. And then, Dedham making its first ever trip, let alone, not just going for their first state title. This is their first trip to the final. So, it's good to see, especially for Winthrop too, because, they were the number 1 seed last year. They were knocked off. They were upset by a 17 seed the year before. They were upset by a 12 seed the year before that. I think I'm getting the order of that right. But so, they've finally been able to piece it all together to get here. I think, you're going to hear me say this a lot, but because coaches say it a lot, that these games starts and ends with the goaltending. And, both of these programs have had some really strong goaltending. with Dedham, they've got the TVL goaltender of the year, Noel Adams. He's been super solid for them, 20 plus save shutouts in the semifinal and in the quarterfinal. He's been rock solid for them. And then on the other side, they've been getting some really good play from everybody, behind the blue line and from their goaltender. So they've allowed the fourth fewest goals in D4, which I didn't even realize until, before the tournament started, that Winthrop was that strong defensively. So, I'd say expect a low scoring game, but the way that these games have gone, now it's going to be 6-5 or something like that. Knock on wood, not to jinx these goaltenders, but the way that they've been playing.
Well, that's always the way it goes too, where we can, because I always sort of sit here and we all sit here and try and sort of theorize and sort of say like, okay, what's going to happen here? What could happen? And then it always happens in a game where the unexpected happens. It's, we like to think we know everything, Tom, but sometimes we don't. But
I'm not expecting Mike Donahue to let that happen for Winthrop, but we'll see.
We will see, but we might not know everything. But one thing that we do know is just looking at Division 3 now. As we move on to Nauset and Medfield, that this game is going to be very obviously two of the best in Division 3. You have number 1 and number 2 going head to head. Number 1 Nauset against number 2 Medfield. Nauset trying to win their first championship in program history, while Medfield last won in 2016. I know with Nauset, I was able to see a little bit of them because I was at the Milton versus Marshfield Division 2 girls hockey state semifinal, and Nauset played right after against Situate, and Nauset just sort of had their way with the Sailors in that one to earn a spot.
Which was surprising. That was surprising.
Yeah. They really put the puck in the back of the net to get to this game. They've just been on an unholy run. They're undefeated. They've allowed 1 goal in the tournament. They've scored 27 across 4 games. And I know, and I remember we spoke. I think it was on the bracket release show just about a month ago now, time flies, with some of the Medfield hockey players. And that final regular season game, it was against Nauset. It was Nauset Medfield. And if I recall, Nauset won 3-0 in that regular season game. So Medfield hoping they can flip that score. But if Medfield's going to do that, if Medfield is going to somehow find a way to take down Nauset, which just, it seems like a tall task. If Medfield's going to find a way to win this thing, what are they going to have to do to be successful?
Well, I will say, to add on top of that it was 3-0, but it was 1-0 heading into the last 3 minutes, and then penalties got the best of Medfield, and then Nauset added 2 more. So right. The 3-0 is a little bit deceiving for how close that game was, but Medfield's just gonna have to figure out how to slow down that attack. Logan Poulin is one of the best forwards in the state. Doesn't matter D1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. He has over 70 points this year, which is just ridiculous. But you think, okay, let's target him and let's really try to figure out a way to take him out of the game. But Jake Eldridge has over 50 points, and Colin Ward has well over 30 now. I didn't check what his latest numbers are, but he had the 2 goals against Medfield that put the game away. So, and they've got more, talented guys beyond that, it's really difficult to kind of just pinpoint, one player. Obviously with the attention that Logan gets, that opens things up. But, if there's a team that's going to be able to do it in D3, it is going to be Medfield. Ben Lesby was their top defenseman. He was TVL MVP. Charlie Duggan has been on fire. He's allowed, 2 or less goals in all but 2 of their games, one of them being to Nauset. So, defensively speaking, as far as, other D3 teams go, they're the ones that are going to be able to do it. And I don't know if many people projected Marblehead to win last year, but Nauset hit the post and the crossbar about what probably felt like 1,000 times to them. And Marblehead was able to get enough from their MVP goalie. So, it should be interesting the way that this one goes down.
All right, yeah, Nauset there. I saw him getting ready to go before the game against Situate, like I mentioned, down at Gallo and Bourne. And, they were all watching the end of that Milton Marshfield game and just seeing those guys. I mean, they got the blonde hair, they got the zip, they got the quarter zips on. They looked like they're all business. And obviously they were able to take care of business against Situate. And they're hoping this time around that they can take care of business again.
They've almost attacked this season with like a certain level of, ferocity too, that, talking to head coach Connor Brickley early in the year, he said that their goal was not to make it to TD Garden. It was to win the whole thing. Like they weren't settling for, the typical coach speak of, oh, we're just going to take it one game at a time. And they do, obviously, they have a respect for every opponent, but they have set their sights on this from the beginning. This is exactly where they want to be, and they're going to be ready for it.
All right. Yeah. They don't want any more pucks. They don't want to go bar out. They're trying to go bar down as many times as possible this time around against Medfield. But if we can move it, take a look at Division 2 now, another interesting one. Top seed Bill Ricca. Canton. If we're going to look at the history real quick, Bill Ricca last won a title in the 70s when they three-peated, 75, 76, 77. And then Canton last won a title a little bit more recent than that, 2023. So as I mentioned, you got a top seed taking on the number 3 in Canton. What gets your eyebrow raised a little bit about this one, do you think?
Well, kind of talking about that history, it's an interesting dynamic here where you look at Bill Ricca and they've been a wagon all year. And they've been a wagon, but this is unfamiliar territory a little bit. Like you just said, 1977 is the last time that they've made a run like this, versus Canton is a program that this is their 5th appearance in 6 state tournaments. Talking with Brian Schumann after the game against Woburn, he said that a lot of his guys that are on the team were in the stands for those games in years past and like aspiring for this moment right now. And so you would think that that's a poise advantage, but you look at the last round, Tewksbury ties the score with under a second left against Bill Ricca. Yeah. And you'd think that's a moment where you would deflate and, you would really just sink down and kind of, mourn what you just lost. But Jim Egan, the head coach Bill Ricca, called timeout. He said he saw no panic. The timeout was purely for rest purposes to then go into overtime with a little extra rest. And they sealed the deal a minute in. They are very poised, and Bill Ricca has been ready for this, and they have been building for this, even though it doesn't exactly show so much in the history books. And, to me, this is the best matchup of the day. Defensively speaking, Canton is one of the state's best. Teddy Schumann, Grady Carr, Will Doucette, all premier weapons defensively. And their focus will undoubtedly be on slowing down Danny Visione, who I believe has over 50 points this year. Excellent forward for them, but Bill Rick is deep. So, Timmy Murphy, James Columbus, Ryan Johnson had the game winner. I could name a bunch of names beyond them. And then I can name a bunch of names on the attack for Canton too. These two teams tied for the most goals in D2. So, it could be a high scoring game, but Connor Giagan, I think I'm saying his last name right. Apologies if I'm not. And Stevie McIntosh have been excellent in net. So I could see it either way. But either way, it's going to be a 1-goal game, in my opinion.
Got you. So this does sound like the Tom Mulheron. I don't know if this is sponsored. I don't know if you have any sponsors or not. The Tom Mulheron game of the day, maybe for you.
This is my game of the day, I think.
Okay, let's put a TM on
that. But my predictions have been extremely lousy all tournaments, so we'll see. But I mean, all these games are going to be great.
Of course,
state finals, right?
I mean, of course,
games are going to be charged up. Probably going to be low scoring, almost all of them. So should be a great day.
Well, we'll save the Tom Mulheron game of the day for trademark for future usage. But for now, I want to move, if we may, last but certainly not least, Division 1, number 4, Catholic Memorial. Number 14, St. John's. I mean, what can't we say about both of these teams, both programs that are very familiar with this moment. Obviously, Catholic Memorial dominated the Super 8 in the 90s. They won 12 titles from 91 to 2005. Last won a title in 2009. They have the pedigree. St. John's last won a title 1999, both from the Catholic Conference. Of course, looking at St. John's, you have the Freak Show, also known as Daniel Manyelkin, and you got Brady Chenevert as well. Looking at Catholic Memorial, they've already beaten St. John's twice during this regular season, but things get a little bit different when you're on the ice at the TD Garden. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens here. When it comes to this one, Tom, CM, St. John's, what intrigues you?
Well, you kind of touched upon it already. What's Daniel Manyelkin going to do? Talking with St. John's head coach Mike Mead after they beat Winchester in overtime in the quarterfinal, he said that when St. John's ended the regular season on a 1-9 stretch, naturally you would not think that they're going to make a run like this. But he had a conversation with, another reporter, and he asked, what's the expectation going into the tournament? And Mike Mead said, is Daniel Manyelkin healthy? And if he's healthy, we're going to win the whole thing. And that kind of touches upon, what I heard in the preseason, a couple coaches saying that Daniel Manyelkin was the best player in the state. And he has the double OT winner against Arlington. He had the OT winner against Winchester. So he's pretty good at hockey. He's pretty good going to Bowdoin. But you also look at that, and he's done well, but all three they've played 3 straight overtime games. One went to double OT, and all 3 they were trailing entering the third period. And all 3, I believe, at least the last 2, when they tied it, it wasn't Daniel Manyelkin scoring a goal. It was Ryder Bisson shooting from the point and somebody either tipping it or getting on a rebound. And they just, there's this no quit to them that, it seems like you can really get behind. And all coaches will say that it's hard to beat a team 3 times in a year. And this is the 3rd time, and Catholic Memorial is 2-0 against them. But there's a reason why Catholic Memorial is 2-0 against them. Defensively speaking, they're one of the state's best. I've said it a trillion times on the last 20 minutes or however long we've been talking, but defense is what wins these games. And CM, they've got an 8th grade goalie Jackson Fleming, who's been awesome. He's had some really great saves throughout the stretch, but at the same time, CM hasn't allowed more than 20 shots on him in many of their games. They're on a 12-game unbeaten streak. I mean, they had to technically forfeit one of those games to Winchester. But as far as performance goes, they're on a 12-game unbeaten streak. And at least half of them, they didn't allow more than like 18 shots on net. So they're going to do their darndest to limit Manyelkin, that's for sure.
I mean, I think you mentioned those OT winners from him. I think it was the Arlington game, the backhander coming down the right side. Was that Winchester?
That was Winchester.
See, that made such reverberations. I'm on my TikTok For You page, as I am late at night, because I don't sleep. Maybe like all of us. And I'm scrolling, and I'm getting a Daniel Manyelkin goal on my For You page at 2 a.m. I was like, oh, this kid's pretty good. Eh? And then you mentioned pretty fast. I mean, what jumped out to me on the video after the goal, the celly, he went straight for, I think it was his goalie or the fan section, and I'd never seen a kid skate faster to celebrate in my whole life. I was like, holy smokes, this kid should be in the Olympics.
And it's funny because you see during the games, the OT, the exhaustion of how slow they were moving, and then all of a sudden the celebration, it's it's full speed ahead. At that point, adrenaline takes over and you feel no pain. You black out.
Exactly. It's almost like how you have another stomach for dessert. It's like, okay, I got another gear here to
celebrate with my goalie, man.
Exactly. You mentioned Jackson Fleming too, the 8th grader. It just makes you think. Imagine just playing in a Division I state championship as a 8th grader. I'm trying to think what I was doing in 8th grade.
The other thing too that I didn't even mention is that St. John switched goalies right before the tournament, and Colin McCarthy was JV, and he's 4-0 in his career, so he's playing really well too. So I'm excited for all these games, Gage.
Yeah, I know. You can't just pick one. It's like, it's
No.
like picking your favorite kid, although everybody does have their favorite kid. If you're a parent, they just won't say it. But yes, there are just so many good ones. And I'm looking forward to it all. I know you are as well. So what games are you going to, which ones are you going to have game coverage at? Is that still game time decision? Are you going to be on site?
I will be on site all day. Story recaps for me for the D1 boys, but I will be there all day.
So you're going to be there ready to rock and roll with your Dunkin' Cup at 9 a.m. Dedham Winthrop?
You know it.
You know it. God.
And, people might complain. The fans might complain about a 9 a.m. game, which it is, kind of a pain to get up and go do that, to go support your team. But a couple of coaches that I've talked to the last couple of years, 9 a.m. is the best spot.
Okay, so
ice is the most fresh that it's going to be. There's no overtime games to dictate, what the start time is. So it's you kick off the day, you set the tone. St. Mary's and NDA went to triple OT. They set the tone the way that they wanted to. So.
And I guess hockey players, there's a lot to deal with when it comes to getting ice time growing up. I never played hockey growing up, but I know ice time's hard to get. So I'm sure there are guys who are used to probably the early wake up calls. But us sports reporters, it might be a little bit different, but if anyone's built for it, I'm sure it's you, Tom. So if you see Tom O'Haron at TD Garden, thank your local high school sports reporter. And you can read Tom as well in the Boston Herald. So thank you so much, Tom, for jumping on as always. And like I said, everybody, keep your eye on Tom's coverage for Sunday. Thanks so much, Tom.
Awesome. Thanks, Gage.
All right. That was boys hockey. That was great. And if we're going to close this thing out, we also need to talk about these two girls hockey state championships. And so to do that, I'm going to bring in another expert, because I have like a whole roster of experts here. It's like the Avengers of high school sports reporters in Massachusetts. It's Mike Puzangara from the Boston Globe. Thank you so much, Mike, for being here. How are we doing?
Gage, thanks so much for having me. It's been fantastic hearing all the reporters from around the state come on for the past hour and a half now and talk about these. It's been great.
Yeah, it's what we do over here. You got to kind of get all this brain power in one spot. So speaking of brain power, I want to tap into yours a little bit as it relates to this Division II girls game. So now changing gears to girls hockey here for everybody. This is number 13 Medfield against number 6 Milton. As I mentioned, Milton, a program I was able to see in that semifinal game against Marshfield, went to double OT. Sabrina Stone, she scored the first goal in the third period because Marshfield was up 1-0, and it was just an uphill battle for the Wildcats for the next 2 periods. It was like, are they going to break through? Are they going to do this thing? They call themselves the Comeback Cats for a reason. Sabrina Stone with a snipe from the left wing gets it done. And then in double overtime, it was still 1-1. And she said, okay, I'm getting kind of sick of this. I'm going to score another great goal. So she did. And now they're here. Milton is in the state championship for the first time since 2006, I think. Mid-2000s, I know that for sure. They've never won a title. Medfield's never won a title. Someone's going to win a title here for the first time ever. For you, as it relates to both these teams, I don't know if you want to start with Medfield. If you want to start with Milton, you can go whichever way. Choose your own adventure. What interests you about this game the most, do you think?
Oh, my God. Well, first of all, the fact that we are going to guaranteed have a first-time state champ in that game is awesome. Someone's making some very significant school history there. So it's really cool on both sides. We can start with Medfield, who I think it's really interesting what they've done, because they had, a pretty solid season throughout most of the year and then kind of struggled right around the end of the year. And you're like, okay, it's not really the time of year that you want to be struggling. Everyone's going to say you want to be playing your best hockey right before the tournament. But Medfield, right before the tourney, they found something. They flipped a switch, hit the reset button, and they have been playing fantastic over the past couple of weeks. It's been really cool to watch their run going on. It started beating, a TVL rival in Hopkinton, Dover Sherburne in the first round. And then they took down the 4 seed in Algonquin, the 5 seed in Burlington, and the top seed in Westwood in the semifinal, in a 2-0 win, which was so cool because, how often are you going to see, 2 TVL teams going at it in a state semifinal? So it was, a cool moment for the conference and for Medfield to pull through after they lost to Westwood in one game in the regular season and tied the other. had to feel amazing for that locker room. They've got a great team. It's really fundamentally sound. I think they're just so solid in every aspect of the game. They have forwards who defend really well. Players like Maeve Kelly and Jenna McDonald are really quality at, controlling the center of the ice and making things difficult for their opponents. They have a very strong D-core. Michaela McDonald is a senior. Parker Cathan is a freshman who's had a fantastic offensive year. I mean, 26 points, including 12 goals as a D, especially as a freshman, is so difficult to do. She's been huge for them. And in goal, Cameron Parachi has had a phenomenal tournament. A pair of shutouts, including in the semifinal against Westwood. Just 3 goals against her all tourney. And they're clicking. They're clicking at the right time. And that's really cool. And we can go into Milton. And Gage, I'm curious. I want to, pick your brain a bit on this Milton team because you saw them last round.
Yeah. The thing that really stuck out to me with Milton was, we're talking about a lot of young goalies. There's a lot of great young goalies here in the MIAA across boys and girls hockey this year. It's Kara Hart for Milton. She's a freshman. She had to stand on her head in the quarterfinals the round before, and she did it again in the semis against Marshfield. Only let up that 1 goal, and it was really on a breakaway. It was just a tough pass that was sort of handled difficultly near the blue line, slipped out, became a breakaway. It was 1-on-1, tough one to deal with. But she had huge saves in that first overtime period and early in that second overtime period before Sabrina Stone decided, like, all right, let's get out of here and get on the bus and go home, and scored that double OT goal. And I thought it was interesting for me. That's one of the only times this year I've been able to see Milton. But from talking to the coach after the game, the way they scored their goals, he was saying was uncharacteristic for the ways that they've typically scored goals this year, which he said usually we get the gross ones, the greasy ones, all the synonyms for just sort of, the rebound goes off a pad or it slips out and you tap it back in. And Sabrina, she went kind of nutty mode with it and scored the 2 great goals, just great individual play from her, just as one player to be able to score and get in. And again, they refer to themselves as the comeback cats, the Wildcats do this year. So, because we were talking with coach after the game, sort of saying like, you go down that 1 goal early on in the first period. By the way, both fan sections, great job traveling down to the Cape for Marshfield and Milton. The barn was definitely buzzing down there.
Had some great crowds down at Gallo over the past couple days.
Yeah, it was phenomenal to see. Those 2 fan sections travel and cross the bridge and get down there. And it was a hostile environment. Milton showed up, but so did the Marshfield students and parents and fans. So after that first goal that Marshfield went up, it was a tough environment. But we were talking with coach after the game, and he's like, yeah, we've been here. This is just kind of the way it is. It's just what we do is, that's sort of the reputation they've gotten when it comes to being the comeback cats. So I'm really interested to see, how their style of play matches up against a Medfield team. Like you said, Medfield coming in as the number 13 seed, they found something late in the regular season. They sort of lit their fire, and it's gotten them to this point. Is Milton, I'm sure, hoping that they're not going to have to be the comeback cats. I'm sure they hope to be leading the entire time this time. You don't want to be behind a TD Garden in the state championship, but if they are to fall behind, I don't anticipate that they would get very flustered. So I'm interested as it relates to D2, how that one is going to look on Sunday. But as we get here now, the final round to close out our show, if we're going to talk about Division 1, it's number 1 Hingham, if we can switch gears. Number 1 Hingham against number 15 Bishop Stang. Hingham last won in 2011, the state championship. Bishop Stang, another program, as the more maybe a handful or 2 of programs that are trying to win their firsts. So as it relates to this one, if you're going to talk about hockey in Massachusetts in the MIAA, whether it be boys, girls, Hingham's going to come up as a very strong school with a very strong boys and girls hockey programs. And the girls here are the number 1 seed, and they're in the state championship. Bishop Stang have found their way here as the number 15 seed. What about this D1 game has your eyebrow raised, Mike, would you say?
This is going to be a fun one in D1. Hingham, when it comes to the MIA's power rankings, they've been, in the top spot pretty much the entire year. And, this is a group that has a lot of talent, and it's led by Caroline Doherty, who is the program's all-time leading scorer. He's heading to Holy Cross to play Division I hockey in Hockey East 2 years from now after a post-grad season. But in terms of MIAA hockey, I think she's probably one of the all-time greats. She's had an unbelievable run there. The point totals are just still climbing. They're still going up. She was on our all-scholastic super team each of the past 2 seasons, over 50 points again this year. So I think you can kind of guess that it might end up being a third time in a row for her. But she's an incredible talent, unbelievable goal scorer, great shot, and super fun to watch. We've got a lot of good supporting pieces around her. Addie Garrity, over 100-point scorer throughout her collegiate career, is just so steady, very strong defensively, and just sets up so many plays for that team. Like, Caroline Doherty does not score all the goals that she has in her career without someone like Addie Garrity setting up those plays. They've gotten some clutch scoring from Callie Crean here in the playoffs, including to beat Belmont in the quarterfinals, which that was a real fight for them against a very good Belmont team, which they ended up winning 2-1. They have a couple strong Ds in Cece Flynn and Shea Richardson, who are having great years once again. It's just a fundamentally very strong team from front to back, and they score in bunches. They're quick, and you kind of always expected that they'd make a run to the playoffs, but for them to get to the Garden, it's incredible for them. And what's even more incredible is what Bishop Stang has done, because 2.5 weeks ago, they had never won a playoff game as a program. And I was down there for that first round game, all the way down in Hetland Arena. And they were equally as excited for that win as they were when they just beat Methuen Tewksbury in the semifinal to get to the state championship. So they're enjoying this run. It's incredible what they've done. It says, Bishop Stang on your bracket, but this is a 10-school co-op program that brings in student athletes from all around the South Coast. And there's 26 players on the roster. Only 7 of them are Bishop Stang students. So it's really impressive what they've done, and the job that Bill Theodore has done coaching them and, bringing this whole group together. It's so cool to watch. And they in this tournament have they've knocked off some incredible teams. They beat Notre Dame Hingham in the second round, the number 2 seed in the tournament, a 4-0 game. And, after that, they went and beat Bishop Feehan 1-0, a team that had beat them twice in the regular season as a conference rival, and then beat Methuen Tewksbury in overtime in the semifinal. And now we're here in the state championship. So they've got some really talented players, particularly their top line, Casey Curran, Issa Rue, and Madison Blanchard, who scored the overtime winner in the semifinal, are all great players. They've gotten some really clutch scoring from Avery Frias on the blue line. She's just a freshman, and she's made some unbelievable plays in this tournament. And in goal, Vivian Mello has just stepped up completely. She's another freshman, and she has been fantastic and kept them in some of these games and made this run possible. So it's kind of, 2 completely different stories here.
Right.
Hingham entering the year, they were like, yeah, we want to be at TD Garden. We want to be playing for a state championship. Stang wanted to win that first playoff game as a program, and now they're here. So it's going to be a fun one. Expect some scoring in this game. There's a lot of talented players on the roster, and I think it's just a really cool experience, and it's a good kind of message that, in the playoffs, anything can happen. Anyone can make that run and make it to a championship game. And it's just so cool what they've done. I mean, we have 4 teams competing for girls hockey state championships. There's one number 1 seed, then you have a 6 seed, a 13 seed, and a 15 seed. Like,
right.
if you predicted that as, your last 4 teams left, hats off to you. Like, that's incredible.
Absolutely. I mean, you mentioned it's a great point when it comes to Bishop staying, and then it's the deal with a lot of hockey programs in Massachusetts, that co-op element. Bishop staying, not just representing their own community, but a lot of different communities in that region. Like you said, they wanted that playoff one, and they said, okay, well, one felt good. What if we just do like 5 more, or however many it is? So that is going to be a really interesting one to watch. If they want to make history, you got to go through number 1 Hingham. And so let's see if Bishop Stang has what it takes. They've answered the bell every time, but there's one more bell left to ring this Sunday at TD Garden. Are you going to be on site? I mean, I imagine you're going to be at TD Garden this weekend. Are you going to have both games? One? I mean, where can people see you if you're going to be at TD Garden?
I'll be at TD Garden. I've got the 11 a.m. D1 game. 11 a.m. We'll see if the start times stay the same. We get a triple overtime first game like we did last year. But I'll be sticking around all day after that, and hanging out all the way until the 7:30 p.m. second girls game. So burning the midnight oil up there on Causeway Street.
Yeah, you'll have some time in between, get that story in, and then regroup for the second one. But thank you so much, Mike, for jumping in and chatting about Division I, Division II girls hockey. I guess we'll see you at TD Garden here on Sunday. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Gage.
All right. Wow. Everybody. What a show. I was fired up about all these state championship games before the show started. And we have all these great people come in and spread their expertise about all the programs they've been covering. And I'm even more fired up. And MassLive is going to have you covered for every single game we just talked about. MassLive is going to have live updates, game stories for every single one. Division 1 through 5 boys basketball, Division 1 through 5 girls basketball, Divisions 1 through 4 boys hockey, Divisions 1 and 2 girls hockey. MassLive will have you covered for every single game at the Tsongas Center and at TD Garden. So be sure to check in with us at masslive.com tomorrow, Saturday and Sunday, for all the photos, game stories, quotes, videos, everything. We're going to have you covered. And if you still need to get tickets for all of these games, if you want to be there in person, if you need more info, go to MIAA.net for more ticket purchasing information. I don't want to see you guys out there. Oh, I don't have my QR code. Oh, I didn't know this. I don't know that. It's because I got to be able to get in the game and cover these things. I don't want to be having to push through everybody. Have it ready on your phone. If you don't have your tickets yet and you need them, go to MIAA.net for more information. Once again, my name is Gage Nutter, and I'm a high school sports reporter with MassLive, and I will see you all hopefully this weekend, where over a dozen new state champions will be crowned. Whether it be new or repeat champs, we will soon find out. Thank you so much to, again, all of the guests that came on. I think we had maybe this many. I don't want to start naming them because I'll forget. Thank you to everybody that came on and gave their analysis and helping out with today's show. It's always great to get everybody together and sort of share their wisdom. Once again, I'm Gage Nutter, and I'll see you all around.